Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Tools and Techniques Thursday. And we'd like to welcome Avi to our Tools and Techniques session tonight. And thank you, Avi, for taking this time out to come and present to us and share how we all can learn and how you've gone through to vertically teach us how to vertically slice those requirements in order to deliver that customer value. Very excited to hear more about this. I'm Ruth Gray from the Durban region of the IIBA SA chapter. And tonight we really do look forward to this session. We will be recording it and I'll be sharing those links with you, as I just want to, before we start, go through just some quick rules on the session today. Just if you can, please stay on mute unless you're clear to talk. Avi might be asking some interactive questions during the session, so please feel free, if you have an answer, go for it. Switch off your video if you can, please. Only the presenter's video will be on. We're looking at about 45 minutes. That's including the presentation and questions. So not long, but really appreciate you taking time on your Thursday evening to join us. And please feel free to post any questions in the main chat panel. We'll read through them and we'll have a Q&A at the end. If we don't get to all of them, we will get those questions and answers back to you. The presentation will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to find those links there for this webinar and previous webinars. So if you've missed any in the past, or would like to send Avi's webinar to any colleagues, you will find it up there in the next few days. And then those who aren't members yet, I highly recommend becoming a member of IIBA South Africa. There's lots going on and lots of resources available to members of the IIBA and a lot of events. So we're hosting an event every week as part of the South African chapter. So go to our events page and have a look at that. And if you'd like to yourself have a slot on a Thursday evening, reach out to us and we can book your seat for the next presentation through the Durban chapter. But thank you for joining us. Thank you, Avi. Really look forward to this presentation tonight. And thanks everybody for joining. We will be sending all these details through, so you don't have to worry to copy it all down or remember anything. You will receive all these details. Thanks again, and over to you, Avi.
Hello, hello. Thank you very much. I will share my screen and try not to mess it up completely. I think I'm sharing this. Let's do a quick test. Do you guys see the cute dog on the top left?
Yes, we do.
Indeed. Okay, fantastic. Yep. So hello, everyone. Welcome to our session. Do you see a little black box or gray box towards the right? Is that moving around? Or do you just see the screen? Just want to make sure.
Screen is fine.
Just the screen,
Screen's fine. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the session. I will look at you in just a moment. I'm trying to get the chat open on the side so I can also try and keep an eye on messages. Okay, hi, I am Avi. I'm a dog dad to a very handsome young man named Andy, who will hopefully make his appearance somewhere tonight. He's sitting up here. Let's give you a sneak peek. Don't worry, the eyes just look like that because of the lighting and the ring. He's actually a very sweet boy. Yeah, he might come join us. So I'm Avi, I'm his dad, Andy, and I am interested in bridging the gap between business teams and technical teams. There we go, there he is. And yeah, helping companies bring about some digital transformation. Okay, I guess Andy is joining us completely tonight. So, you know a bit about me. Maybe let's post in the chat who's here. Tell us a bit about you. Anyone from a different country, that would be pretty cool. Anyone drinking anything interesting? I'm pretty boring. I'm drinking water. Let's test out the chats though. Go ahead and post something. There's no one posting. Oh, there we go. I'm in Cape Town. That's exciting. There's a cold there. It's so cold up here. The only reason I don't have a jacket on is because I've got the heater on. It's not that I'm impervious to the cold. I'm really not. Kempton Park, that's cool. It's freezing in Cape Town. Is it really? Yeah, even up here in Johannesburg, it is so cold. From Zimbabwe, that's cool. Welcome, Leanne, Durban. Ooh, exciting. We've got people all around the country and in neighboring countries too. Very cool, very cool. Okay, we'll start in just a moment. I need to just nationalize and find everything I need. Okay, we'll start now just a moment. Sorry, it is cold indeed. Okay, let us start. Hello, Stefan. I hope I said your name correctly. I hope I pronounced it well. Okay, in Canada. Wow, that's exciting. Hello, Juliet. Okay, so let's get going. I'm Avi. I like dogs. That's my claim to fame, I guess. I have a little website. You can go visit it if you want to. You can learn more. There's a link to a pet adoption app that I built. Go check it out. I think it's pretty cool. Okay, so let's start with this talk and get going from there. Okay, so we're going to talk today about vertically slicing requirements to deliver customer value. Okay, and that's a bit of a mouthful. So maybe let's start with why we write requirements to begin with, right? What is your perspective? So maybe in the chats, why do we create requirements to begin with? What's the purpose of doing so? You can take a moment, post it in the chat. Why do you write requirements? Like what's the primary purpose, do you think? Okay, while people are typing, I'll give you my perspective. So I think we write requirements to build cool stuff. And ultimately, it's to build things that add value to users. So some people would call them users, some people would call them customers, and there's a subtle difference indeed. I'm going to probably use them interchangeably, but I'm going to be talking about writing requirements to make sure that we get a product, a software product, into the hands of people that are going to use them, and that we get those products out in a meaningful and timely manner, that we build meaningful experiences. Okay, that's why I think we have requirements. That's a primary purpose of it. I'm looking at the chat and seeing some really cool answers, making sure we understand what the client wants, absolutely. Translating needs, yeah. Stating the requirement and the solution, yeah. To ensure the product meets users' needs, absolutely. Look, so I have this mental model that at the center of all of what we do, there's a customer, right? And extraneous to that is things like our software development methodology, agile, waterfall, whatever process you use. It's the tools and the techniques, whether we're using Jira or Trello or whatever products we're using. Those are all enablers to build something that a customer uses, right? And the primary reason for the talk tonight is to talk about how to get requirements into products into the customer's hands as soon as possible, right? I mean, in a waterfall methodology, we'll eventually get something to a customer in a few months' time or a year's or two's time, and it'll work, right? It'll work and hopefully it'll work well, and that's fine. And even with Agile, if you try and split up your requirements in different ways, you'll eventually get something to a customer, and that's fine, and you'll continuously build on that. The technique we're going to talk about tonight is getting something into a customer's hands as quickly as possible. Okay, so we're going to keep the customer centricity model in our mind, and then we're going to talk about how to enable that. Okay. So I'm going to find how to change a slide. There we go. Right. Maybe let's just to set expectations. Vertical slicing requirements is a cool technique, and there's a lot of information about it. The intent of this talk is to raise awareness about it, and you can go search and find more resources to know exactly how to do it. The breadth of the talk is we're not gonna have enough time to go deep dive into it. So we're gonna kind of talk about what it is, when to use it, how to use it, and a distinction that I found confusing initially, and that's between like a customer journey versus slicing it up into requirements. And I think that might be useful. Okay, so in agile delivery, I think the two important concepts in it is iterative delivery and incremental delivery. Okay, and I see iterative delivery as improving software continuously, and I see incremental delivery as providing some customer value quickly and then enhancing it over time so that people can do more and more cool stuff with it. Okay, just checking the chats quickly. Okay, some cool information, some links. There we go. We'll pretend you know what methodology you're using and take a product live anyway. Yes, modern cowboys, love it. Absolutely love it. Modern cowboys, I kind of call us gunslingers. Yeah, it's a cool analogy. Okay, so I'm going to start off by talking about the way I mental model. No. I'm going to talk about the way I mental model software applications in general, right? Regardless of the software application you're working on, regardless of the project, the company, the client, the tech stack, this is kind of my mental model of how products work or how software works. There's a, sorry, just a moment. No. There's a presentation layer, which is what a user sees and interacts with. So it's a screen, there's buttons, there's colors. Then there's something we call the business logic layer, and that takes care of the business processing. And then we have the data layer, which stores information. Okay, so if I had to consider a pet adoption application as an example, let's say I could view pets available for adoption on a little app on my phone. I would see the pets available for adoption. I'd see the name of the pet, for example, and a picture of the pet, and that would be the presentation layer. Okay, the pets that I see, the fact that they're dogs or cats or Great Danes or German Shepherds, that could be business logic, right? A client or a customer says, we only want to show dogs available for adoption, or we only want to show cats available for adoption. And that's some kind of business logic or business process. And then there's this concept of a data layer, which stores the pet's details, the pictures, the information, you know, which shelter they belong to, that kind of stuff. Okay, so this is the way I conceptualize any software application. There's a presentation layer, which the user interacts with, a business logic layer, which services what the user interacts with, and a data layer, which stores information. Okay, makes sense? Now we're going to talk about how to slice these requirements or slice our software applications in a way to deliver meaningful requirements, right? And depending on the client or the project that you're on, you might have tackled some of these problems before, okay? And one way of splitting up requirements is to slice them in horizontal slices, which align to software layers. So maybe you've been on a project that says, we're going to build screens in one iteration, then we're going to build the backend in another iteration, then we're going to build the database in another iteration. Okay, that's one very valid way of splitting up requirements. It works. That we would call a horizontal sliced approach. Okay, so you would tackle the screens first, in another iteration you tackle the business logic layer, in another iteration you tackle the data storage layer. Okay, a consequence of tackling it like this, though, is that you need 3 iterations to get something into a customer's hand, right? You need to build a presentation layer in one iteration. You need to do a business logic layer, a backend in another iteration, sorry. And you need to do a data layer in a 3rd iteration. So in 3 iterations time, you can get something into a customer's hands. And that might be fine, right? If your iterations are 2 weeks long, in 6 weeks time, you could get something to a customer and you could continue from there. The technique we're going to talk a bit about tonight is vertically slicing these requirements so that in one iteration, you do a bit of presentation layer, you do a bit of business logic layer, and you do a little bit of data layer. So that means you build something that a user can see. So colors on a screen, picture of a pet available for adoption. You build some business logic that says, let's show all dogs and cats available for adoption, or let's only show dogs available for adoption. And you build a bit of the data storage layer that says, well, here's some dogs. You know, you can view the details of a dog. You can view the picture of a dog. You maybe can't view all the information yet. You can't view multiple pictures, but here's a single main primary image of the dog. Does that kind of make sense so far? Yeah, I'm looking at the chats. Anyone with questions? You can feel free to post them in the meantime. Okay, I'm seeing some yeses. Cool. If you have questions, post them or reserve them to the end. Happy to tackle it either way. Okay, makes sense. Great. Let us then talk about slicing our requirements differently. Okay, so there's this concept of the vertical slice. And as we spoke about with the vertical slice, each increment contains screens for the user to interact with, some business logic to follow business processes, and some data storage for fetching or saving information, right? A horizontal slice, we said, tackles it architecturally. So maybe let's take a moment and get a feel within the room. How do you guys tackle your requirements? Anyone use vertical slices, horizontal slices, maybe something else? Very keen to see what you guys use. We'll look at the chat. Mostly horizontal. Okay, that's interesting. Anyone else? Or maybe something else completely. I'd be quite keen to see how you guys slice things up. What software tools do you use in this approach? We'll tackle that in a moment. No slices, mostly a combo of all. Okay, just both. Horizontal. Okay, so I'm seeing a mixture of horizontal and vertical. And I think the little piece of information that I'll share, or a way of figuring out whether you're doing horizontal or vertical, is when you deliver something at the end of an iteration, what do you get out of it? Do you get a piece of the software requirement, or do you get something that someone can use? So they call it cake slices if you do vertical slicing. And that's one way of getting pieces of products out. So you can test it at the end of a cycle. Instead of just testing that the screen looks correct, you can test it when you click a button. It actually follows a process and saves some data, retrieves some data. Okay, vertical slices, cool, good. I saw a question about what tools people use to do this. I think we can talk about specific tools that we each use towards the end, but this is tool independent. So it's more of a concept. Do you slice your requirements for people to use it immediately, or do you slice it to deliver in iterations? Just two slices, back-end work and then front-end work, cool. That's one way of tackling it, and that's probably a slightly more horizontal slice approach. So front-end and then back-end will often contain the data with it. Feature at a time, that's cool. Laura, that's a really cool approach. Vertical, when we work with different teams, cannot align. I'm reading the chats as we go. Developers aren't too keen on vertical slicing. Yeah. So I found that there can be some reluctance, and some of that reluctance stems from that integration concept between the back end and the front end. So having a full set of screens sometimes can be useful. But yeah, okay, so different approaches, absolutely interesting to see some of the approaches being used. Okay, let's talk then about when we could potentially use vertical slices. Okay. Okay, so I see vertical slicing as being an approach to use throughout the SDLC, right? I've seen it tried to be approached where a technical team only delivers in vertical slices and business requirements come in horizontally. That's a bit tricky though, because you get like a ton of screens and then you've got to pull out vertical slices from that. What I found to be quite useful is if an entire team from product owner all the way to tester understands this concept of vertically slicing. And if both of those, or all spectrums in between product owner and tester and user understands the vertical slicing concept, it makes it a lot easier to start planning up front, because then everyone's speaking a common language. Okay. I think it's useful when you want to break down large and complex projects into multiple different iterations. If you've got something relatively small and you're delivering it in 2 months anyway, it doesn't make too much of a difference if you're vertically or horizontally sliced. In 2 months is going to be done. So I find it useful for projects that are spanning over months, or even projects that could go for a few years, or enhancement projects that you just keep on building. Breaking it down into vertical slices helps get iterations out and features out relatively quickly. Okay, I'm looking at the chat as we go. Interesting comment. If you want quick time to market, in vertical slicing is the way. Iterative releases with the product becoming richer in features every iteration. Yeah, I really like that comment. I conceptualize it similarly. Thank you for that. Okay, continuously enhance software applications. We spoke about this being an agile approach, so you incrementally and iteratively enhance features over time. Absolutely. I see a question. This sounds like use of user stories. Is vertical slicing the same as use of user stories? That's a really good question. Let me go through a bit more of this and then we'll tackle it at the end. We'll make a note though to tackle it. So I deliberately didn't use the words user story or use cases because those are artifacts for these things, but it's a good question and we can talk about that. Okay, like we said, it makes sense for incremental delivery over time. If you've got a waterfall methodology, say it's 6 months or a year or 3 months, however long it is, if you've planned all your requirements up front, then this doesn't really make sense. So I see this as kind of a way of maximizing success and minimizing the chance of things going wrong. If things go right, you really don't notice the difference. Like in 3 months' time, you'll have the same product. Vertically slicing it just helps to get that product into people's hands faster, so they get, or testers' hands even faster, so they can start clicking around, making sure that things work well. Okay, quickly going to look at the chat. Components, case management. Okay, I see a comment. I think that might lead into a question, but we can tackle that in a moment. Okay, how to use vertical slices conceptually at the very least. Like we said, this talk's just not going to be long enough to go into a deep dive. But conceptually, I tackle this by understanding the end-to-end business process first. Okay, so what is the user journey or customer journey, or whatever terminology you want to use? What is that end-to-end journey that someone's going to use while using your software? You know, as an example, let's say someone needs to upload a document to a website, and let's say you don't have a scan on your phone. The end-to-end journey is someone physically signs a document, they walk over to a photocopier, they photocopy to a scanner, they scan it, they send it to their email, it comes sit at their desk, they open up the email, you know, they save it to their desktop, they open up the website, they find the file, they upload the file. That's the end-to-end process, okay? So I would start by understanding what that end-to-end journey looks like. If you understand the process, then slicing it is one way of tackling that process, okay? Then I would split those processes up into smaller requirements that deliver some benefit. And we'll kind of allude to what those smaller pieces are, but the smaller pieces are like little chunks in the process that would start delivering value individually and in and of itself. Okay, then we divide each of those pieces or those increments into some vertical slices. So you might have multiple vertical slices. If I think about the case of, let's say, uploading products to sell on an e-commerce store, okay, there might be multiple vertical slices. There might be a vertical slice for logging into the application, a vertical slice for selecting your product, capturing the details, for selecting the price, and then for viewing the product. So an end-to-end process can be broken up into multiple vertical slices. Okay, and then once you've got your set of vertical slices, you can figure out how long your iteration is, and then understand how many of those vertical slices to bolt together. The way I like to tackle it is, in this end-to-end journey, let's say there's 20 steps, and let's say of those 20 steps, you need 15 vertical slices. To try and choose the vertical slices that together will be useful to a customer. So if at the end of this iteration, sprint, 2-week period, or whatever methodology you use, at the end of this piece of work or period of work, you have something with a set of vertical slices that are useful. As an example, if you have an e-commerce store, you might have a set of vertical slices that allow one to upload a product. You know, nothing fancy, you can't upload multiple products at a time. You can upload one product at a time, you select the price manually, you upload a picture. That might be one increment worth of work, one iteration worth of work with multiple vertical slices. Okay, I see some questions in the chat. That's great. I think keep posting them. What we'll do is continue with the presentation and then we'll start tackling the questions. Okay. Okay, so I mentioned this thing of end-to-end business processes, and initially when I started applying this concept, I got confused between business processes and horizontal slices. Okay, so just as a reminder and just to clarify, an end-to-end business process is something that a user does or a customer does, and I would equate that almost to a physical process. You know, if we were in an office situation and you wanted to upload a document, that end-to-end process is what we spoke about. Okay, horizontal slices, on the other hand, is how you break up how you break up a piece of software according to the layers of an application. Excuse me for just a moment. Apologies for that. Okay, yeah, horizontal slices, not the same as end-to-end business processes. Business processes are what a person does to achieve some goal. Horizontal slice is how a software application is broken up into layers. Okay, the way I see end-to-end business processes are user journeys that solve a problem for a customer. So the problem is I want to upload products onto an e-commerce store. I saw a question earlier on about user stories. When I initially typed this out, I said user stories that solve a problem for customers, but then I avoided the terminology because that's one way of tackling it. It's the way I do it. I like working with user stories, but you can absolutely achieve the same thing with use cases. It's all about the journey versus the software architecture. Okay, I'm seeing some questions, comments. Okay, cool, good. We'll tackle those in a moment. Keep them coming. Okay, so end-to-end business processes are the user journeys of what you're trying to achieve. Okay. Some of the benefits of these vertical slices that I've found is that they provide a sufficient level of abstraction so that different pieces or different roles or responsibilities in the team have a common understanding. If you speak to, for example, a product owner as a developer, if you guys are talking in vertical slices, you're talking about user features. You know, you're saying, I want the ability to upload a photo. I want the ability to create a profile. Regardless of the software architecture, regardless of the database structure or the backend complexity, that's kind of what you're trying to achieve. That's a customer value. Okay, and I find that estimating customer value is more meaningful than saying, well, the database is going to take me 2 days and the backend is going to take me 3 days. Like, to a product owner or to the other portions of the team, that's just not meaningful. Like, you know, who cares about the backend? Let's get some customer value out of this. I also find that it's useful in complexity and time estimates. It's going to take me 2 weeks to do this feature, or like a week to upload this photo, as opposed to saying, yeah, the backend's going to take me 2 days. You know, it goes back to that concept of having a common language or piece of terminology that multiple stakeholders understand. Okay, another benefit I found is that it helps to improve the quality of software requirements because it forces one to think about what the customer gets out of it. And, you know, at the beginning of this, we spoke about why we write requirements. Is to articulate a need well, define a solution, and make sure we get customer value, right? And I found that sometimes if you go in slices, you say, I want the screens to look like this. When you click a button, I want you to go to the next screen. But if you're not thinking about where the data gets stored, you're not thinking about what other integrations you need, you can sometimes miss the mark on the screen design, for example. Okay, and one last benefit of it is that when you're testing it, I feel like you're testing from the customer's perspective. So you've sliced something in the way a customer can use it, and you test it in the way a customer can use it. So instead of just like clicking around on the screen or testing APIs or like looking at a data structure or database design, you're looking at actual features. You know, this is a feature to solve the problem of the customer uploading a profile photo. Okay. Kind of makes sense so far. I see some cool comments. We'll tackle those, like I said, in a moment. And kind of to wrap it up, the way I think about this is thinking end-to-end business processes, plan it out in iterations, and deliver it in incremental value. In my mind, that's, you know, one of the fundamental principles of Agile, and this is one way of tackling that principle with these vertical slices. Okay, comfortable. I see questions. I'm going to ask then Laura or Ruth what the process to tackle those questions are. We've got a few minutes. How do we go about it?
Hi, Avi, I can read out the questions. I know you've answered a few as you've gone along, but I think,
okay.
And yeah, just you might have answered them already, but there was one about, it relates back to the user stories, and I think it was related to, is vertical slicing the same as the use of user stories? I don't know if the context around that was when you were talking about the vertical slicing, and that was when the question was raised.
Okay, sure. I don't think it's one and the same thing. Like I said, when I was writing or typing this out, I wanted to use the word user stories. I think a user story is one artifact that can be used. I think it's one that ties very well to vertical slices because it's from the perspective of a customer or a user. You know, as a type of customer, I want to do something, but you could very well achieve the same thing with use cases or process flows or any other artifact that you want. So not the same thing, but the way that I tie it together for sure. I use user stories to achieve those vertical slices.
Okay, then that might also answer this question, but you might have more to add to it. Could story mapping be used to get those slices as well?
Okay. Story mapping is really a cool concept, and I think everyone defines it slightly differently. So I'll explain how I understand it. We'll try and get a common base, and then we'll talk about whether we could use it. So in my mind, a story map or a feature map or a customer map or one of the other words that you'd like to use is a way of taking a large requirement and then breaking it down into meaningful pieces. So for the person who asked the question, correct me if I'm wrong, or correct me if you've got a completely different understanding of it, but I see it as a way of marginalizing or chunking a product into distinct sections, you know, like an admin section, for example, a login section,
yeah, that's exactly right. And then it's like sort of mapping that process and then putting the tasks below each of those. And you can, and now that I think about it, it's probably a stupid question because then you can horizontally organize those by priority. So it's actually more horizontal. Yes.
So it could be horizontal. I do think it's a cool way of splitting it up. So for example, I would do it with like admin functionality and login functionality. And the horizontal process, there's more of the end-to-end business process. But you could absolutely tackle that in vertical slices. So if your admin portion has, you know, 3 screens, you could either build the 3 screens horizontally, or you could build the create a product screen, the edit a product screen, and the delete a product screen vertically. So it's definitely a way of tackling it. A cool way of breaking up a requirement or a project, and then I guess you could choose the approach you want with delivery. Absolutely.
And then just another one from Karai says, vertically slicing is heavily dependent on knowing the process. Have you ever had challenges discovering the end-to-end process? If so, how did you overcome that challenge? Or did you overcome the challenge? Or do you overcome the challenge?
Yeah, that's actually a fantastic question. And I'm going to, Laura, I think we can pre-sell this also. There's different ways of understanding or discovering a process. One of those ways is called event storming. And I think keep an eye out on the IIBA communications because there's a session on that coming up at some point also, I believe. But yeah, it's definitely forces you to think in end-to-end processes. And I find that's useful, right? So there's 2 concerns you're asking if we ever have challenges in discovering those end-to-end processes, absolutely. And I think this is why vertical slicing is good, because if we're not articulating those business processes correctly, then we know we're just documenting or artifacting things just for the sake of it. Techniques that I use to discover the end-to-end business process are process flows, drawing. I love to draw. I've sat in meetings where I've pretty much pulled out, well, you know, stood up to the whiteboard, draw little squares, and I draw terribly. So draw little squares and like write labels and try to figure out the process. Doing it remotely, pull out. I use Paint because I'm like that, I guess. Draw little squares and figure it out. I think whatever technique works for you to uncover a business process, use that. Vertically slicing it is then just a tool once you've uncovered that business process.
Great, thanks. I mean, I think this one's slightly related to, but from Ockett, it's trust vertical slicing and iterative execution will go faster for enhancements against existing solutions or not. Guess that the end-to-end business processes or user's journey is visible, right?
That's a very interesting comment and question. In fact, I read a blog post or a website about this recently that spoke about the value of horizontal slices for new projects and the value of vertical slices for enhancements. I think it's definitely a valid school of thought that, you know, you set up your architecture initially horizontally and then you deliver in vertical slices to enhance it. Absolutely. I have tackled new off-the-shelf, well, you know, brand new projects with some vertical slicing. I think the way it's delivered is initially some groundwork, you know, setting up the architecture, setting up the authentication, the authorization. That almost feels like horizontal slices because you're doing a piece of work. But that's not necessarily something that I would document for a product owner. You know, the fact that we're building authentication, authorization, and a database structure, it doesn't really matter. So it depends to what degree you want to be technical, and it depends to what degree your product owner wants to see what you're building. But yeah, it's a valid school of thought to say initially you do kind of horizontal slices and then you vertically slice it. I found that just speaking in customer language, as a customer, I want to log in. And then, you know, there might be like 2 weeks of work initially to set up that for a new project, but you just estimate it to be a longer time. So you don't get lost in the detail of here's how we're building it. You say, here's what we're getting out of it. So yeah, valid school of thought. I tend to use vertical slices regardless though.
And then a question from Leanne. Can you start with dev on a slice without knowing the whole end-to-end process?
Good question. Yes, from an agile delivery perspective, absolutely. That, you know, that's one of the fundamentals in agile. You kind of uncover and you deliver as you go along. It can be tricky though, because the opposite of that, or, you know, the kind of agreement with that is, with agile, if you don't understand the full process up front and you're delivering in these vertical slices, there's a chance of rework. So if you're at a customer or client or project or team that understands it's going to be rework, then absolutely, I think it's valid and it's definitely possible to not know the full business process up front. If you're in a situation though where, you know, the norm or the understanding is, you know, why are we doing rework? Then I would say understand your business process up front, because the benefit of agile is you can uncover as you go. The risk of agile is that you've got to kind of rework as you go, and that might take longer than expected.
Cool, thanks. And then there was just a comment from Stephen to say, most often it feels like throwing requirements against a wall to see what sticks.
Yeah, I that's particularly why I like these vertical slices, because then you're not figuring out what sticks in your own head. You're actually getting it to a tester, getting it to a customer. The sooner that something is tangible, the faster you can iterate on it, as opposed to conceptual. Yeah, so yeah, it's a cool comment.
And then just a question that came up earlier: what software tools do you use in this approach?
Cool. To be honest, I've used several different tools depending on the team that I've been on. Visio for drawing process flows, Microsoft Word for, you know, writing user stories. I'm pretty basic like that. Miro definitely for, you know, story mapping. Yeah, I would say use what you have available. The concept here is write a vertical slice. I mean, fundamentally, you could do it in Notepad if you wanted to. It's just about articulating it in a way that makes sense. I've drawn pictures, I've written in Notepad documents, whatever your team needs is a tool that you would use. There's not a particular one to try and slice this that I've found, at least.
There was just a comment from Maureen saying the best approach is to understand your as-is process up front.
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of the discovery journey that someone mentioned. Understand the process. If there's a system in place, understand what it does. If there's no system in place, understand how they do it physically without an application. And if it's a brand new startup, then understand what they're trying to achieve. But yeah, that is definitely very important.
Cool. I don't see any more questions coming through. If there are any more, just post them. We are coming to the last 5 minutes of the session anyway. But yeah, I'll just take the time while it's quiet just to say thanks again to Avi. Great presentation. And thank you to everyone who took time out on the Thursday evening to join our Tools and Techniques Thursday. And for those in Cape Town who are cold and those all over the world, thank you for joining us from near, from far. It's great to have everybody from different chapters and from different regions and different countries on our session tonight. So yes, thank you everybody. It's been great to have you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evenings or days if you're in a different time zone, I guess.
Thanks everyone. Lots of thank yous coming through, Avi. So thanks very much.
Only a pleasure. I hope it was useful. It was a very shallow dive, unfortunately, but it's raising the concept, and you guys can do more research on that for sure.
Have a good evening and good morning to those on the other side of the world. Enjoy the rest of your day as we approach into our evening. Thanks again, everybody.
Thanks, Avi. Thanks, Ruth.
Thank you.
Bye. Oh no, I forgot to show the